Welcome to IVF This, episode 131, Pregnancy After IVF. Hello, my beautiful friends. I hope you're all doing so well today. Now, major trigger warning, just at the top of the episode, so you don't go any further. If this is not a subject that feels safe for you, if you're not quite there yet, or you don't even want to hear it, that is totally fine. I've got 130 other episodes that you can listen to that don't pertain to this. So please feel free. Next week also is going to be parenting after IVF. So take a 2-week break for me if that is what you need to do. You're not going to hurt my feelings at all. I would rather you take care of you than put yourself into a position where you don't feel comfortable, or if it triggers you in a negative way or something like that. Take the time, come back to me in a couple of weeks. I will be here. Another episode will be here. But I do think it's a really important time. We're 130 episodes into this thing, which is insanity to me. I think we're like somewhere around 130,000, 125,000 downloads for this entire podcast. And when you think about IVF, it's a pretty niche kind of area of the world, like my corner of the world. To have 130 almost 1,000 downloads of this podcast is just, it's incredible to me. So thank you, first and foremost, all. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for coming back here. Thank you for taking the information that I offer you and applying it to help yourselves through this process. That is what this podcast has always been about. So I always want to encourage you to congratulate yourself. I am not putting this podcast, like I can't play it for you. I can't make you listen to it. So the fact that you're doing that and showing up however often you are, you're showing up for yourself to make this process easier, to take care of yourself, and all of that should be celebrated. So I do think, though, it is an important time in the podcast to start talking about what we do after, let's say, IVF has wrapped and we are now pregnant and we're becoming parents, right? Because that's kind of the goal. We want to be pregnant. We want to become parents. I think that there is this tension that we innately feel within ourselves that because we have done so much, our blood, sweat, tears, all of our money has gone into this process, we have a lot of preconceived notions about how we should think, how we should feel when we're pregnant. And so that is what this podcast episode is designed to do. I've got like 3 or 4 areas that I want to talk about: anxiety, gratitude, and compassion. And then some subsets of those, just some helpful little nuggets for you to take home with you or in the car with you or wherever you're listening to this podcast. But just to help kind of ground you, take some of the pressure off, like being pregnant and being a parent, like that, let's be honest, this shit is hard. It's hard no matter what, whether you've gone through IVF or not, whether you've experienced infertility or not. These things are hard, physically, emotionally, mentally, they're demanding. And so I just want to take a little bit of the pressure off for you guys, okay? So I told you we're going to start with anxiety. That is probably the most commonly heard, the commonly coached thing that I work on with my clients, whether they're in the middle of an IVF cycle or many of my clients have become pregnant, right? And that is still something, it's a common theme that we talk about. So first and foremost, pregnancy is an anxiety producing situation. I want you to think historically, pregnancy is quite literally the most vulnerable time in a woman's life, particularly towards the end of pregnancy. You might find, if you're kind of into the end parts of your pregnancy, the larger you get, the more effort it takes for you to do things, the more physically taxed you are throughout your pregnancy. That's quite literally an incredibly vulnerable experience. So I don't want you to be taken off guard or caught off guard if you start thinking about things like, I could die during delivery. That is an incredibly common thought, right? Your fight or flight instinct is kicked up to 1,000 towards the end of your pregnancy, again, because it is the most vulnerable time in your entire life, right? So I want you to kind of accept that anxiety is going to be a friend that hangs out with you throughout the entire experience and then some, right? Anxiety is not a bad thing. Anxiety is like your superpower for telling you when something could be dangerous when telling you that you should be on the lookout for something. It is an evolutionary superpower that we have, that we can kind of scan the environment and take notes of all of the things that could cause us harm emotionally or physically, right? It's a very important mechanism. So it's okay to feel anxious, right? Another thing that I want to make sure that we touch on is if you have had experienced a previous loss, whether that's miscarriage, whether that's chemical pregnancy, which is a form of miscarriage. I know we sometimes talk about those separately, or if you've had failed transfers, that loss, it's going to color, not necessarily influence, but it's going to color your experience, right? So sometimes the goal is that we have this like aspiration of finding calm or finding peace throughout our pregnancy. You can, and that's completely accessible to you. It might not be the most realistic expectation for the entire experience, okay? Particularly if you have experienced loss or a repeated recurrent disappointments, right? If you've been on this journey for a while and now you're pregnant, it's not like that's just going to go away. And I'm going to talk about that here in just a minute, but I want you to think of calm or peace or whatever it is that you feel like you need to be experiencing or that you should be experiencing. We're just going to drop those expectations. Just set them down. What is a realistic expectation, right? If you at your baseline on a scale from 0 to 10, with 0 being absolutely not a care in the world, to 10 being anxiety ridden and you have difficulty functioning in your day-to-day life, if you sit at about a 6 or a 7, peace and calm might not be the most realistic expectation. It might be calm-ish. It might be peaceful-ish. It might be anxiety-ish or neutral-ish, right? I want you to give yourself an opportunity to embrace the ish and how that can help you kind of move through this experience with less pressure. Staying present is a skill. I hear this a lot from my clients. Like, I just want to be present in the moment. That is a skill. It's a totally attainable skill. It's a skill. It doesn't just happen out of thin air, right? So if you've never necessarily practiced mindfulness or presence, staying present, that's not a problem if you haven't. Just want to nip that in the bud real quick. But if you haven't really ever practiced it, being pregnant isn't going to be the thing that's going to magically decide that all of a sudden you can stay present, right? What you want to focus on is feeling calm, feeling safe in your body. Okay. You can cultivate that for yourself. You can create safety. Safety has a lot to do with grounding. Safety has a lot to do with reassurance and confidence in yourself that I'll know what to do if, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. So I'm not going to rush those, but I want to remind you that you do get to create a sense of safety for yourself. And if you need any help with that, you can go back through any of the 130 previous episodes, because I talk a lot about safety and how you can create that for yourself. An episode that jumps straight to my head is what ifs versus even ifs, right? Creating a sense of calm or safety or whatever that looks like, safety-ish, right? Embracing that ish. That's going to get you more mileage towards being present, right? Because being present means that at this moment, you're not experiencing anxiety. Anxiety is a very future-focused experience. It's a very ambiguous thought. Like most of the time when we experience anxiety, it's around ambiguous big things rather than really specific things. Specific things we can like decide, we can plan for, we can use logistics to get around. But anxiety lives in the future. Anxiety lives in the ambiguous. So staying present is kind of an art form that you can create and cultivate just by practicing, right? So if you're not great at staying present, first of all, I don't think that there's a gradation for staying present. I don't think that exists. But if that's something that you want to learn, you can. A lot of that looks like journaling. It can look like, again, grounding and breath work and things like that. So just because you tell yourself, oh, I need to be more present, no, you don't. You don't. You can be more present and you can learn how to be more present. But remember, this entire episode is about taking the pressure off of yourself. Okay. Another thing I want to add in terms of anxiety is that this pregnancy isn't occurring in a vacuum. Remember, I mentioned earlier about if you've experienced loss or recurrent disappointment, things like that. That truly does color your experience, right? And so there's no magic switch that gets flipped whenever you get pregnant. Your anxieties and your fears and the things that you've been maybe struggling with, they're just going to morph into new things, right? New fears, new anxieties. It's not just going to magically go away. And I told myself many times when we were first in that first like 18 months of trying to conceive with our first child. And I told myself, if I could just get pregnant, I wouldn't have to focus on this so much. I wouldn't have to think about it so much. But you know what happened the moment I got pregnant? All I thought about was staying pregnant. And how could I stay pregnant? And how could I make sure that I brought this baby home? And all of these things that I didn't necessarily have a whole hell of a lot of control over looking back. But it wasn't like I got to just drop all of the anxiety and fear at the door. I just carried them along with me, right? And so I want to set that expectation for yourself. You might have told yourself that you would get to feel differently, and you probably are feeling differently in a lot of ways now that you're pregnant. But it doesn't mean that those things are just going to go away. It doesn't mean the pain of previous losses are going to go away. You can carry that pain. You can carry the pain of that loss and be excited or grounded or happy or joyful with this current pregnancy. Both of those can exist at the exact same time. And you know that because they are existing at the same time. One doesn't take away from the other. They're two separate things. Okay. One thing that really helped me after my first pregnancy, when I got into subsequent pregnancies, was kind of reframing my anxiety, right? Some of my anxiety was really, I honestly believe that I was experiencing perinatal depression. I think that's right? Depression when you're pregnant. And I think a lot of that had to do with, number one, I had a history of anxiety and depression when I was much younger. So I was at a higher likelihood of that developing. But number two, I had these preconceived notions of once I got to this place, then I would get to feel blank, right? Just that feeling, no other feeling, right? So when the anxiety kicked in, I interpreted that to be there was something wrong with me. There was something inherently wrong with my pregnancy, that I wasn't worthy of this, all of these things, right? When I got to my second pregnancy, and I had a lot of health stuff with my second pregnancy. I was in the hospital for several days. I got a really bad kidney infection and was in near sepsis, and we could have easily lost my second baby. So then I had to reframe my anxiety. I had this narrative. I had this story that I told myself that my anxiety around my pregnancy and staying pregnant and staying healthy and all of this meant that I wasn't bonding. I wasn't bonding with my baby. I wasn't bonding with my pregnancy and things like that. But when I reframed my anxiety to be more about safety and how I wanted to take care of this baby and I wanted to keep this baby and I wanted this baby to be with me, right? That was the underlying need that my anxiety was trying to tell me. That really helped take the pressure off of the anxiety is preventing me from enjoying this, right? I was enjoying being pregnant, parts of it, parts of being pregnant, I was enjoying, but it didn't mean that that was the whole of the experience, right? That there was a natural expected part of me that was going to be anxious, but that meant how much I wanted it, how much I wanted that baby, how much I wanted that pregnancy, right? It didn't have to mean that there was something wrong with me. I got to make it mean how much I wanted it, right? And you get to as well. And then one of the last things that I think really speaks to anxiety is the idea that we won't know what to do if. What happens if I start bleeding? What happens if they don't find a heartbeat? What happens if, what happens if, what happens if, right? And I talk a lot about this on the episode, What Ifs versus Even Ifs. I would highly encourage you to go back and listen to that if you have a bunch of what ifs going on in your head. But one of the things that you want to do is if you have a bunch of those questions or those fears, write them all down and then answer them. If I start to bleed, then I will call my doctor's office. I will go get seen. I will go get scanned, right? If they don't find a heartbeat, I will be devastated. And I know how to take care of myself when I'm devastated. If you're living through an IVF journey, you have been devastated and you have survived. You have done that. And I want you to remind yourself of that power, that strength that you have. Nobody wants to be devastated, but it doesn't mean that you won't be able to survive. Okay? And that's a lot of what our fear around loss means, is that we think that we're just going to fall over dead. And that's not the case. It hurts like hell. It is heartbreaking. It is hard. It sucks so much. But that doesn't mean that you're not capable of surviving it. Okay? So that is one of the things that I want to make sure that you really hammer home. That is something that will also create safety for you. It will also create more certainty for you, is reminding yourself that no matter what happens, you know how to take care of yourself. You know how to take care of that baby. You know what decisions will need to be made. Or if you don't know what decisions need to be made, you'll know that you can make decisions when that time comes. The goal of that is to take the uncertainty out of the anxiety so that it doesn't overpower you. That's the goal. All right. We're going to switch to gratitude because, God, do you know how many times I heard, particularly in my first pregnancy, whenever I would complain about not feeling well or not really enjoying the pregnancy because I didn't feel well, that I would be like, you just be grateful. Either I was telling myself that or somebody else was telling me, like, you've worked so hard for this. You know what? F that. Yes, you have worked hard for it. Yes. But everyone has the right to complain. Everyone. And just because you've worked so hard to get something doesn't mean that that thing isn't hard, right? The experience was hard and the thing can be hard too. Okay. I want you to know that not every moment is meant to be cherished. I got to tell you, I have had some tough pregnancies. I am not someone who has enjoyed being pregnant necessarily. I love being a parent, but I've never really enjoyed pregnancy. I think the vast majority of my pregnancies, my kids were trying to kill me from the inside out. But it doesn't mean that I didn't cherish moments throughout, right? Moments when I didn't feel like I was dying were wonderful, right? When I got to feel the baby move or, just like caressing my belly sometimes that didn't feel good either. But I got to cherish the moments that I did cherish. And I didn't feel the pressure, certainly not in subsequent pregnancies, to make myself feel grateful or to make myself cherish a moment that otherwise probably wouldn't be cherished. Okay? So not every moment is meant to be cherished. Because of all of the effort, again, the time, the money, the mental and emotional bandwidth, we think we have to soak it all in, right? That's an option, but it's not a requirement. Right? I want to make sure that if you are in that place and maybe you're experiencing some really gnarly pregnancy symptoms, it's okay to not like that. It's okay to want to get to the next, trimester or to get to delivery, whatever it is. That's not a problem. It's a problem when we tell ourselves, well, no, you're a piece of crap because you worked so hard for this and you should be cherishing it. No, that's the problem. Okay? That's the thing that's optional that we get to toss away whenever we like, because the experience is not the same for everyone. And the social media curated view of what pregnancy should look like and how it should be this most beautiful, magical time in your life, I really found it to be the sweatiest, most nauseating experience of my life with, and truly an uncomfortable experience. That doesn't mean that it wasn't also beautiful. All of those things can be true at the same time. Okay? I mentioned this earlier, but there's no one. I don't think that there's anyone on this planet who has appreciated the totality of the experience 100% of any experience, right? Getting married. Maybe you're excited to plan the wedding and it's hard. It's hard. It takes a lot of focus, it takes a lot of money, a job that you have worked really hard to get. You probably slaved for days and days and days, hours upon hours, months upon months, years upon years to get to that dream job. You can appreciate that, and it was still hard to get there. And maybe the job is still pretty demanding, right? Everything is 50-50. 50% of the time you're going to be grateful and loving, and it's going to be hopefully everything that you dreamed of. And then 50% of the time, it's going to be really hard and uncomfortable and frustrating and all of the other things, right? It gets to be both at the same time. You don't have to place the expectation on yourself that you should only feel one way or another. It gets to be a lot of different things at the same time, and that is being a human. You're a human growing a human, and that shit is hard. Okay? So that leads me to compassion. Be gentle with yourself. Please be gentle with yourself. So gentle. You are not going to intentionally or neglectfully do anything to jeopardize your pregnancy. You are going to toe the line so hard that that's probably not even going to be an option. Okay? You're not going to put your baby's life in jeopardy because you're going to be focused so much on your safety and the baby's safety. So reminding yourself that I'm doing everything that you can. Everything that you can. And that's going to be something that you can go back to, and go back to, and go back to time and time again. You know that you have a lot of guidance from your OBGYN or your reproductive endocrinologist on what you should not do, can and cannot do as pregnancy evolves from the start to the finish, the medicines you can take, the foods you can eat, the activities you can and cannot do. You know how to do this. I promise you. And as long as you're willing to figure it out, that's all you need. Okay? I'm going to leave you with one last thought that I want you to hold on to. You can make variations of this thought, whatever's going to resonate most for you, whatever's going to work most for you. Write it down on a sticky note, put it on your bathroom mirror, put it on your desktop computer monitor, whatever it is, something that you can remind yourself of all of the time. I have done and will continue to do everything in my power to protect myself and support this little tiny life that is growing inside of me. Everything outside of that is window dressing. Everything outside of that is the icing on the cake. You are doing everything in your power to take care of yourself and to support that tiny little life, and that is all that matters. Okay, my beautiful friends, that is what I have for you today. Take some of the pressure off. You're going to enjoy parts of it. You're not going to enjoy other parts of it. And anxiety is just along for the ride. It does not have to be the driver, but it is going to hang out with you. More than likely, it is going to hang out with you. And that's okay. Remember, that is you reminding yourself that you know how to take care of this baby. And that's the important thing. All right. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of IVF This. If you like what you've heard, click subscribe and follow to make sure you don't miss an episode. And if you want to learn more, head over to www.ivfthiscoaching.com to learn how to work together.